Welcome back to the Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage. Need a mortgage that fits your life? Rocket can.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Our next guest is one of the top radio guys in the country. He is the co-host of Boomer and Gio on the Fan in New York City. He is Gregg Giannotti, and he joins us now on our progressive guest line. Gio, what's going on, my friend?
What's up, Jake? Happy to be on the show.
I appreciate you coming on. So when I first texted you to come on yesterday, it was to talk mainly about the Jets and what they might do in the draft. They, of course, are a huge story nationally with that second pick. And then the Niners made that massive trade moving up to number 3, and it seems like the indication is, well, they moved up to 3. They know what the Jets are doing at 2, and they're comfortable, of course, sitting there at 3. So how do you view that trade, how it impacts the Jets, and what they might do now with that second overall pick?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I think anybody who's been following this thing understands where Joe Douglas comes from, some of the relationships he has in the league, Rob Saleh, the same thing, and the teams that were involved here. And also, you know, as you mentioned, what you saw behind the Jets as well. I mean, the map is there. The Jets are taking Zach Wilson, and it takes the drama out of it for sure, but there's going to be a lot of drama once he is selected, as here we go again with the New York Jets and this franchise trying to find the next quarterback. And I can't sit here and tell you that I know, you don't know, nobody. Joe Douglas doesn't know how it's going to work out. And there were 2 distinct paths that they could go, which was either trade down, accumulate more picks, take the best player that's not a quarterback at number 2, take Zach Wilson at number 2. And they decided that Zach Wilson was good enough not to pass up. And I just hope that this isn't a Justin Herbert syndrome from last year, because I feel like this stuff happens where, you know, there's a lot of talk about a guy going number 1, like we saw with Joe Burrow last year. Then there's another guy who has a great year in Justin Herbert, and the Jets are thinking, oh, man, well, we missed out on Trevor Lawrence, but, you know, Zach Wilson could be just as good, if not better. I know that Joe Douglas would do the evaluation. I don't know. There's so many of these guys that you just feel like you're just throwing it against the wall to see if it works out. And I remember last year there was a couple of people that were on Justin Herbert. I remember we had Phil Simms on. We were doing a Saturday show, Boomer and I, before the draft, and he came on and just spoke glowingly about Herbert, thought he was better than Burrow. But that was one of the few voices that were out there. I know there's a couple voices that really like Zach Wilson, but, you know, this is one of those things. Joe Douglas better be right. Just like Dave Gettleman, the other team that we talk about all the time, the Giants, he better be right about Daniel Jones. You better be right because you're going to be tied to this guy for the rest of your career.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll ask you this because you're covering Joe Douglas and the Jets up close every day on the radio. Do you have confidence that he's the right GM to make this decision?
I do. Sometimes you want to take the personal the personal conversations that you have out of the evaluation. But there's a couple times that I've had a chance to talk to Joe Douglas off the air. And on the air, he's been great with us. And a couple times off the air where I've had an opportunity to talk Jets with him and other things, he has really impressed me, really impressed me. So I do believe that he is. And I do believe that he is smart. And I do believe that he is a great evaluator. If you look at his track record, when he was with Baltimore, you know, when one of the reasons why he shot up the general manager stardom ladder in the way that he did is he was a guy who was head of the undrafted free agent pickups for that organization, and he was nailing them every single year. He was nailing them, and he talked about that with us glowingly. So I know he's a great evaluator. I think he's got the right personality for this market, and I think that he's going to turn it around. And I, quite honestly, I was one of the guys that thought I would have rather seen him keep Sam Darnold for a year, try to resurrect him, see where that went, and then either trade back, get more picks, or if you fell in love with a different player, we'd probably trade back, get more picks. You saw what happened with the 49ers. Trade back, get more picks, and then build a roster that way. I was one of those guys. I did believe that was the way to go because, Rob Saleh, when he was doing press conferences and when he came on with Boomer and I, was talking about quarterbacks that have been in the system that Mike LaFleur is going to be bringing to the Jets that have had career years. And you're assuming that this roster around Sam next year is going to be a hell of a lot better. And to see those guys grow, Ryan Tannehill been one of those guys. Jimmy Garoppolo up and down. We understand his career, but for crying out loud, he went to a Super Bowl. I mean, you could see some of these guys. I mean, and make the case that Sam could be the next one. But he's going to go all in on Zach Wilson. Man, the chips are in the middle of the table, and we're all going to watch to see how it works out.
Gregg Giannotti with us from The Fan in New York City, co-host of Boomer and Gio. And, to your point on Douglas, I think a big part of this, Greg, on why they're moving on from Sam is that Joe Douglas never drafted Darnold, that he now has his own head coach that he hired in Robert Saleh. And he looks at it like, if I commit to Darnold going forward, he becomes my guy, even though I did not draft him. That was Mike McCagnon. So I think he looks at it like, let me go get my quarterback if I'm not sold on Sam being my dude long term.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. You're right. I mean, and you would think that, someone who comes in and sees a situation would not have that be a factor every time. Like, I didn't draft this guy. Well, I mean, if he's great, doesn't matter if you drafted him or not, but we obviously know Sam isn't great. I don't think Joe Douglas is going to take Zach Wilson just because he's desperate to have his own guy and he wants to start that rookie quarterback salary clock. I don't think he's that desperate to do it. Yeah, if he didn't like Zach Wilson, if he didn't believe that he had the personality to, take the weight of the Jet quarterback on his shoulders, he wouldn't take him. So even though it wasn't the way that I would have gone with this whole deal, I have to believe. I can't also tell you that I believe that Joe Douglas is the right guy and then disagree with what he's doing. I have to at least have some faith in what he's doing. And quite frankly, I do like the fact that, Zach Wilson, his personality seems to be a little cocky, a little bit of an edge. He was talking about his swag yesterday, which is something that Sam Darnold certainly doesn't have. So I kind of like that about Zach Wilson. As far as, playing quarterback, you can wow me out on a field and make some of the throws that he did. I mean, you remember Sam Darnold's pro day, right? You're a Jets fan.
Yep.
I mean, you remember Sam Darnold's pro. People were talking about him. Oh, he's throwing in the rain. It's one of the great pro days we've ever seen, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. So it's just, it's hard to project. But I do believe that, if Joe Douglas isn't just doing this because he wants his guy, he's doing this because he loves Zach Wilson.
Here's my concern with Wilson. He looks like he's 17 years old, so he's got the baby face going. So I don't love that, but I'm willing to, take him on as our own if he plays well, of course. But B, I have had so many people call my show and refer to him as Mormon Mahomes. We got to lose that nickname, Greg. Could we come up with something better than Mormon Mahomes?
Yeah. Let's try to do that. I don't think we'll do it today, but at some point we do have to come up with a better name. And you're right. I mean, I know that Justin Herbert. Remember when he cut his hair? I mean, he looked like he was about 7 years old when he cut his hair after last year and then shaved. So I mean, that's something that we've seen. But I do think that there's something about growing up in Utah, going to college in Utah, then getting thrown into the fire that is the Jets quarterback. That is not necessarily something that's easy. And same thing with Sam. I mean, it's sort of hard to evaluate Sam Darnold because the Jets just put him in the worst position possible. And I always ask this question, and it's hard to make generic statements about it, but sometimes I think, are there organizations that make quarterbacks, or do quarterbacks make organizations? Sometimes it's a little bit of both, and it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know if Sam Darnold's drafted by somebody else. Does he end up being a Pro Bowl player? You're not sure. But, Sam was totally overwhelmed. He comes into a situation. He's like 20 years old. He's from Southern California. He gets launched into this pressure cooker. He's got a coaching change. He's got different offensive coordinators every year. They tear down the roster. He gets mono. I mean, it just was one thing after another, and I don't know if anybody would have been good enough to overcome all of that, but Sam and his personality and his talent level certainly could not.
I feel terrible for him. I do, because he's just 23 years old. He's younger than Joe Burrow, but it's such a risk to stick with him because, the argument I get from Jet fans, Greg, I'm sure you get it too with the callers, is, well, look at Ryan Tannehill and then Alex Smith when he got some help. And it's like, yes, that'd be great if Sam turned into that, but are you ever winning anything of significance if that's all he is? Like, if you're going to pass on a quarterback at 2, you need to have belief that Sam Darnold's a franchise guy, that he's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, it's just that we haven't seen him in any sort of situation that could succeed. And I understand the Ryan Tannehill thing. That was a team that went to an AFC title game. I mean, I think you would take that. I mean, the last time the Jets were in an AFC title game, they had Mark Sanchez as the quarterback. And while they were playing well, you felt like he could win a Super Bowl at that point. Now, obviously, it didn't work out, but there were times there, especially when they were mounting a comeback against the Steelers in 2010, that you were probably thinking to yourself, this guy's going to be the next Super Bowl winning Jets quarterback. So, I mean, it's hard to put these guys in boxes and hard to make comparisons, but Sam he has to, at this point for him, he's got to get to a place like Pittsburgh, and I don't even know if that's possible now, them bringing in Dwayne Haskins and what they're trying to do. But, I'll just use that as an example, where that there's a veteran starting for a year, like what the Indianapolis Colts had last year with Phillip Rivers. He needs to take a year, especially with him being so young, and be with a winning head coach, a winning quarterback, a winning organization, see how that's done, and then take over the year after that. Because that, to me, is the only way he's going to jumpstart his career if he goes somewhere else. It's got to be the perfect organization where something like this can't happen again.
Gregg Giannotti, the co-host of Boomer and Gio on WFAN in New York City, with us here on the Jake Asman Show. Let's talk about you, Gregg. I mean, I tuned into your show earlier in the week. I'm watching you try and take down a bunch of wings here. You talked a big game, and in 90 seconds, I think you only had, 8 chicken wings? What happened there?
Yeah, I think it was 9. I thought it was 10. Everybody was telling me 9 with the replay. Well, so this was a classic me being overconfident and running my mouth. I heard Joey Chestnut, is the super eating professional eater champion, ate 33 in 90 seconds. And that number just did not sound like a lot to me with some of the other things that I've heard him do. So I said, man, I don't think I can get to 33, but I could probably get into the 20s. I mean, and I think that anybody who's been at a sports bar, a few beers, you put appetizers in front of you and you're hungry, you could just plow through it. But I just never understood the power of 90 seconds until I had all those boneless buffalo wings in my mouth. And I was just thinking, this is just insane. And the breading and the chewing, and I didn't dip them in any sauce. And then I got the choking in the back of my mind because the company made me sign all sorts of waivers that if I died on the air, my family couldn't sue them. So now it was in the back of my head. And it just ended up. I still contend, though, that of anybody else at that radio station, I would have done better than they did. But the problem was that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was for me to get close to 20 in 90 seconds, and I failed miserably.
In fairness to you, having to eat that many wings at 8 o'clock in the morning? That's got to be that's hard in and of itself.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I appreciate the take, Jake, but I got to tell you, anybody who's done mornings, once you get past 7 o'clock, you can eat anything because you've been up so much already. You've already been awake. It doesn't matter. This is not like a scooping out a bagel and some grapefruit and a cup of coffee like a person with normal hours. I mean, once it hits about 7:30, I can eat anything. I am prepared for anything because I've been up since 3:15. I've been moving. I've been doing stuff. My body's going. My mind's going. So it's definitely not the time. It was just me. It was me being cocky.
He's Gregg Giannotti. You can find him on Twitter at GioWFAN. He is the co-host of Boomer and Gio on WFAN Sports Radio in New York City. He's kind enough with his time to talk Jets and his chicken wing eating experience, all that. Gregg, I appreciate you coming on. All the love. Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with these words of wisdom from someone that I know. My apartment is under 40 degrees.
Great stuff there from Gregg Giannotti, and he's right. I mean, during that snowstorm, my apartment was well under 40 degrees. I appreciate Gio calling in there. If you're not familiar with Gregg, one of the best guys in the business, awesome on the radio with Boomer Esiason every day on CBS Sports Network. You can watch them. So appreciate his time there. We'll take a quick break and continue, wrap up hour 1 of 3. Jake Asman with you. This is the Jake Asman Show right here on Sports Map Radio.